Hello and welcome back to Rebecca. I wanted to wrap up all of the short fiction that I've been reading because I've been trying to dip my toes into the world of free short fiction and science fiction and fantasy because there is a ton of it out there that is free online, output by podcasts or magazines, so you can get a really broad range. And short fiction is so varied and it's a great way to find new and up and coming authors. So I've been trying to do that as well for award purposes. I just wanted to try and see what's out there and get a more broad experience with this short fiction that usually I'm waiting for the awards to tell me what to read. I want to try and nominate a few this time around. So this is just going to be a very casual wrap up of the stuff that I have read in free online short fiction. So in January, I only read a couple of things. First, I read We Travel the Spaceways by Victor Laval, and this is not eligible. This was published before 2022, so not up for any awards, but it was phenomenal. This was actually from the Amazon.com collection. They have, I think, 2, maybe 3 selections of short fiction up to novelette length. They usually put out both print and audio together, and they're free if you have Kindle Unlimited or Prime Reading. And I love this one. I have been a big fan of Victor Laval, so that was kind of why I picked it out of the collection. Really great story following this homeless man who hears voices of aliens talking to him from tin cans. And it's just such an imaginative take on what we would perceive as mental illness and giving us kind of a new perspective. It also features a strong trans element character to this, so that gives us as well a real empathy for the character and their relationship with this trans person that they interact with. So really about being an outcast in the world, and it engages with those themes so well in such a short package. Then we have Like Stars Daring to Shine by Samato Ihise, and that was in both Fireside and Escape Pod. This one I liked, but it was just barely into the short fiction range, and it felt a little underdeveloped for me. So this story, we're following 2 children as they're kind of going somewhere they're not really supposed to. We are in a post-climate disaster world, and it has very strong, hopeful dystopian vibes. So I enjoyed it, but it wasn't super memorable or strongly developed. And the third one from January was We Built This City by Marie Vibert, and that was from Clark's World. And I really enjoyed this one. So this is in the novelette length. It feels very strong in terms of how well the world building is developed, because we are in this setting where there's a domed city. We're following a woman who is a service worker. She cleans the dome, and her mother literally was one of the people who built the city. And so we're following these really strong themes of corporatism and capitalism, where she is this service worker is literally keeping the city running, keeping people alive by cleaning the dome. But because she's a service worker, it's very looked down on, and the corporate bureaucracy really devalues her and her fellow workers a lot. So that's what is the conflict that we're seeing play out. So there's a lot of like collective worker action elements here. I love it. Those are definite catnip for me, and that will come back in some other stories. So that was it for January. In February, I read another 3 stories, I think. First, I read Destiny Delayed by Ogenichove Donald Ekpeki from Asimov's, and this one I did really like. It was very familiar in terms of the story elements, because I had just read another story at Desk 9501 in the collection Best of World SF, and they're both Nigerian stories, and they both engage with the same themes. So in this story, we are following a loan officer who puts out loans for people who don't really have anything for collateral. So people who are very much in need and trying to start a financial life, but they don't have anything. And in this story, they take out the person's destiny as their collateral. So that was similar to At Dusk 9501, because here they're taking away destinies in trade for certain monetary stability and kind of the benefits of that. In At Dusk 9501, they're trading years of their life, and we see this sort of capitalistic predation on people who don't have anything, giving up years of their life in order for financial stability. So this one, I like the storytelling immensely. I think much more than At Dusk 9501, but I like the actual prose in At Dusk 9501 much more than this one. So this one, the prose level didn't quite work for me. I just couldn't get along with the text itself, but I was gripped by the story and it carried me along. So I think this was a very strong one in the short fiction length. And then I read The Sound by Rachel Handley in Sonder Mag. This one was, I think, flash fiction. It's very, very short, and so I can't talk too much about the plot. Basically, people start hearing the sound of trees, and that's about it. So there wasn't much plot, I think, for the length. It was interesting, and it kept me engaged, but I don't know what the point really was. And I think the last one that I read in February was Ponies by Keej Johnson from Tor.com. This was an older one, so it is not eligible for anything, but this had been on my radar for a while, and I really enjoy Keej Johnson's writing voice, and I enjoyed this one so much. This is another very short one. I don't know whether it's quite in the flash fiction. I think it's in the short fiction length, and it's all about how, well, we're following a group of girls. One girl in particular is about to reach sort of a milestone in her life where she and her pony, all the girls grow up with ponies, they sort of have to give up something of themselves. And it's very much about what we do, what we shave away from ourselves in order to fit in based on social pressures. And it's a really powerful and gripping story. I think it was like one of my favorites in the actual really short category because it is so well developed. But again, this one wasn't from 2022, so it's not in competition for anything here. Then in March, I read The Empty by Ray Naylor in Asimov's, and I adored it. So this is another real wage slavery corporate bureaucracy story. We are following a drone pilot, but not like military. We're in sort of an Amazon future where everything is delivered, the stores have all sort of shut down, and it's sort of a wasteland with trucks speeding by to deliver items and drones flying around. And so you get that sense of it being a corporatocracy, really. But this is just this worker punching the clock. You get all those vibes. I work in a corporate environment, so mandatory trainings, being overloading this person, and then she sees something she's not really supposed to see, and it sets her on the path of not being able to look away, and it may be causing problems for her with her job. And that is where I will leave it. But this was easily my favorite in the short fiction category. I really, really enjoyed it. I think everything about it was well developed, from the feeling of it being a slightly dystopian future, but also being so utterly relatable in that sort of corporatocracy category. Yeah, it really got to me. And I think this is in the short fiction category, but it feels like it's a very near novelette length, so I'm not sure, but I'm pretty positive it fits in short fiction. And I was reading through Ray Naylor's short fiction in order to decide whether I wanted to buy the full-length novel that he put out in 2022, and I did. I immediately bought Mountain in the Sea, so I have that to get to next month. I also read Fostering from Ray Naylor, and that one I didn't get as much what the point of the story was. We're following someone who fosters a young boy and is very, very calmly and sort of peaceably telling us all about the process of fostering this child and how she cares about this child and the different things that she's teaching him and why this is so important in their world. And it's sort of a dystopian, maybe not quite human situation, but I didn't totally get it. So I don't feel like I got the answers, but I loved the world building. I thought it was great in terms of like keeping me interested and really pulling me along with the story. But yeah, I didn't totally get the plot. Then I read a couple of novella length items that were available online, and actually the first one I didn't finish. So I picked up or tried Blimpies by Rick Wilbur from Asimov's, and I didn't finish that. Not because anything was actively wrong with it or it was bad. It just didn't grip me immediately. I was not super interested in whatever was happening at the beginning, and so I just moved along because there's so much. So then I read Snowflake by Nick Wolven in Asimov as well, and this one I liked, but it wasn't super memorable. We are starting out with sort of a pop star who is very mentally ill and addicted to drugs, and that's most of the story, is all these people surrounding this pop star trying to keep her going as she's on tour. And that's about all I would tell you of the plot. It does go somewhere sort of interesting at the end, but it feels like it doesn't really flesh out the speculative element that it actually delivers at the end. So I wanted it to kind of start from where it ended. So it was okay, not terribly memorable. And then Goldie by Sean Monahan in Asimov's as well was a great one. I think probably my favorite of the novellas that I've read online. Really, really interesting story where we're following a group of varied scientists. It kind of gave me the vibe of Kaiju Preservation Society, where you have all these people geeking out together about their different fields, but not silly and over the top. This one is pretty serious. And they're in some weird habitat, probably a different planet, and they're studying this migration and reproduction of this being, Goldie, who, I don't want to describe it because the description of Goldie is kind of mind-bending and interesting. You just have to discover it on your own as it goes along, I think. But it's such an impactful story, the way that it is sort of layered and plays out over the course of the story. Even though it is quite short, it's on the shorter end of novella length, but it's enough that you do get a satisfying story. So I think this is, as I said, the best of my novella length stories online that I've read, but it's not beating out my favorite novella that I read from last year yet, which was Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So I think that is all of the actual individual short fiction I've read online. Oh, I read one more, but I don't think I'm going to nominate it for anything. I did read Pages to Fill by Travis Baldree, and it's just a blog post. It was also included in the traditionally published versions of Legends and Lattes. It's really short. It's background for Viv's story in Legends and Lattes, and it's really short and sweet. It really made it glaring how much he writes dialogue, because it's almost all dialogue, and I enjoyed it. It was, as I said, short and sweet, but not anything terribly memorable, not terribly additive to the story, and I don't think it was really meant to be. So I think that's it for online stuff. I also did read all of the Bliss Montage short fiction collection, which was, I think, 10 stories, and I enjoyed all of the stories, but there weren't any real individual standouts that I would put forward to an award. I think as a whole, it was a very strong collection, so I could see people nominating it as a collection for awards. It is all speculative, but not in the typical sci-fi fantasy vein, so I think more literary readers are going to be picking it up. I'm also in progress with reading Best of World SF Volume 2, and there are a number of individual stories, so far at least, that are original to this collection that could be eligible to be nominated on their own. But I don't think any of the original ones are ones that I would nominate so far. There are a couple that have been standouts, but they were reprints. However, one of them is from Sadzi Hossein, who has, I believe, a novella. It's kind of right on the line. It's over 200 pages. Kundo Wakes Up is the name of the novella. That is a companion novel and novella length to the story that I read, Bring Your Own Spoon, as well as a previous work in the same world that he's writing in. So I really want to try to get to that one early into April ahead of the Hugo Awards. And I'm very interested to see how that one works out because I enjoyed this short story very, very much. The other standout was by Natalia Theodore, and it also was a reprint, but Natalia Theodore does have a novelette length short work that is eligible for 2022 awards. So I really want to get to that one and try it out. It is currently on the list for the Nebulas. So I want to try to get to that one before the Hugo. So I think that's where we are. So in terms of where I'm at award-wise currently, I do think I'm going to come back around before the Hugo and say what my favorites are in each category. But I do think that short fiction, The Empty by Ray Naylor is my current favorite. We Built This City by Marie Vibert is my current favorite for novelette. And in novella, Ogres by Adrian Tchaikovsky is my current favorite. So those are the short fiction categories. So that's where I'm at with my short fiction reading. I've really been enjoying dipping into all this free short fiction online and some fantastic audio performances. Honestly, I'm really surprised that these groups that are, producing podcasts are finding great audio narration for these stories. So I've been enjoying quite a bit of that. So that is it for me today. Thank you all so much for watching.